What if the greatest royal love story of the modern age was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated performance? What if the man who sacrificed his crown, his country, and his family for love suddenly discovered that the love itself had never truly existed? That is exactly the nightmare Prince Harry stumbled into on that fateful day in Montecito. The story begins not in a palace, not in front of a roaring crowd, but in silence. Behind the heavy wooden doors of the Sussex estate, Harry's world came crashing down with the turn of a single page. A diary, Meghan's diary, filled with words that would slice deeper than any headline, deeper than any tabloid rumor, deeper even than the venom of royal critics. Words that revealed the coldest truth. I never loved him. I needed the title, not the man. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine for a moment what that must have felt like. The man who gave her everything. The man who turned his back on the traditions of the monarchy, walked away from the privileges of royal life, and chose her above all else. Only to discover that, in her own private words, it was never about him. It was about the crown. It was about the status. It was about power. But how could this be? Was Meghan truly playing the long game all along? Or were these the scribbles of frustration, taken out of context, the kind of private venting that anyone might write in a journal? That question, that gnawing uncertainty, is what makes this story so haunting. Because Harry wasn't reading gossip columns or internet conspiracies. He was reading her words, her handwriting, her confessions. For years, the world had debated their relationship. Was it genuine love or strategic ambition? Was Harry her fairy tale prince, or simply the stepping stone to Hollywood dominance? For years, royal experts, biographers, and even estranged family members like Thomas and Samantha Markle had whispered that Meghan had a plan from day one. But now, in Harry's trembling hands, he held the evidence that suggested it was all true. And here's where the stakes rise. Because diaries aren't written for the cameras. Diaries don't lie to Oprah. Diaries don't pose for Netflix crews or charity galas. A diary is raw. A diary is unfiltered. A diary is where the mask falls away. And in Meghan's private writings, Harry saw the mask shatter. This is where the human drama truly begins. Think of Harry, a man shaped by trauma from childhood, haunted by the loss of his mother, and forever searching for stability and unconditional love. He found it, he thought, in Meghan. She was the woman who made him feel alive again, who promised to protect him from the shadows of the monarchy, who vowed to stand by his side against the world. That was the narrative, wasn't it? But in her diary, the truth looked very different. She wasn't protecting him. She was using him. Not the man, just the title. Those 6 words carried more weight than any royal decree. They destroyed him. Now, let's pause and ask, why does this matter right now? Why should the world care about one couple's private heartbreak? The answer is simple. Because this isn't just any couple. This is Prince Harry, the son of Princess Diana, the man once destined to stand beside his brother William as the monarchy's modern face. This is Meghan Markle, the woman who promised to rewrite the rulebook, to modernize royalty, to show that love conquers all. Together, they were supposed to be the fairy tale. But instead, their story has become the cautionary tale of ambition, betrayal, and devastating irony. And here's the irony. The very status Meghan supposedly wanted is the very thing she now stands to lose. Because Harry wasn't just heartbroken when he read those lines. He was furious. The betrayal ignited something inside him. A determination to reclaim his dignity, to protect his children, and to draw a line Meghan never thought he'd draw. For years, she had controlled the narrative. She had been the speaker, the advocate, the star of their Netflix series, the voice in interviews. Harry was always the supporting role, the man nodding beside her. But this discovery flipped the script. Suddenly, Meghan wasn't in control anymore. Picture the scene. Harry pacing the Montecito estate, diary pages scattered on the floor. The once charming prince, now red-faced with anger, his hands clenched, his voice cracking between rage and heartbreak. Neighbors oblivious, the world clueless, while inside those walls a marriage imploded. And let's not forget the children. Archie and Lilibet, innocents caught in the storm. Harry knew in that instant he had to protect them, to shield them not just from paparazzi, but from the toxic lies that had invaded their home. That's why the decision was so swift, so brutal, so shocking. Meghan had to leave. But how does a man who once said he'd never let history repeat itself suddenly repeat history in his own way? How does Harry, who watched Diana's pain splashed across tabloids, now find himself exiling the mother of his own children? That is where the tension cuts deepest. And here's where the audience feels it most. Because this isn't just a royal scandal, it's a human one. Haven't we all wondered, deep down, whether the person we love loves us back for who we are, not for what we can give them? Haven't we all feared being used, being played, being blindsided by someone's hidden agenda? Harry's nightmare is universal, only magnified by the cameras of the world. Now, don't think Meghan's diary was just a slip of the pen. No. According to whispers from insiders, the entries stretched far beyond a single sentence. They painted a picture of someone who saw marriage less as romance, more as a contract. Someone who measured love in terms of opportunity, status, visibility. It was always Plan B. One entry reportedly hinted, suggesting America and Hollywood were always the destination, the crown merely a springboard. Imagine Harry's horror realizing he was never the destination. He was the transportation. So why now? Why are we talking about this today? Because in the aftermath of this discovery, the palace itself stirred. Quiet whispers reached London. King Charles, Princess, and even William, all reportedly notified of Harry's fury. And while some may have pitted him, others simply said, "We warned him." This wasn't just a marital spat. This was the unraveling of an international partnership, a brand worth millions, a family once considered unstoppable. And yet, and here's the chilling part, Meghan wasn't defeated when Harry told her to leave. No, she was already planning her counterattack. The woman who once conquered Hollywood, infiltrated Buckingham Palace, and commanded Netflix was not about to roll over. She would fight. She would spin. She would weaponize the very media Harry despised. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The beginning of this story belongs to the discovery, the pages that shattered everything. The betrayal wasn't in the press. It wasn't in a palace. It wasn't even in front of Harry's face. It was hidden in plain sight, bound in leather, filled with ink, waiting for the day it would be found. And when it was, Harry's entire life, his marriage, his family, his future, collapsed. And so we ask, was this destiny? Was this the inevitable end of a union built on unequal goals? Or was it the final, tragic twist in a love story gone wrong? One thing is certain, the Harry and Meghan saga is no longer about escaping the crown or living free. It's about betrayal, revenge, and survival. But here's the question we'll explore tonight. If Meghan's words in her diary were true, if she never loved Harry, then what does that mean for everything they've told us? The Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the speeches about compassion, authenticity, family. Were they all scripted lines in Meghan's grand performance? And if so, what does that say about the woman Harry gave his heart to? Hold that thought, because what Harry did next didn't just shake his marriage. It shook the very foundation of the empire they built in California. And as you'll soon discover, Meghan wasn't the only one writing secrets in ink. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. From the outside, it looked flawless. A sprawling Montecito mansion with sunlit gardens, sprawling lawns, and a security gate that seemed more fortress than family home. The kind of house where Hollywood royalty and Silicon Valley billionaires rub shoulders. Birds chirping, cameras snapping from a distance, and headlines painting Harry and Meghan as the ultimate modern couple, glamorous, independent, defiant. It was supposed to be the happily ever after the storm. But what if it wasn't? What if that pristine image, the one carefully constructed for Netflix documentaries, glossy magazine covers, and Instagram perfect moments, was nothing more than a fragile illusion, one that could collapse at any moment? Let's peel back the curtain. When Harry and Meghan first arrived in Montecito, their neighbors weren't just impressed, they were stunned. The royals had fled the monarchy, battled the tabloids, and now here they were, sipping lattes at local cafes, shopping at designer boutiques, jogging along coastal trails. It seemed like the fairy tale had simply relocated from Windsor to California. Oprah was down the street. Ellen was nearby. Meghan had Hollywood producers on speed dial. Harry had philanthropy projects and Netflix millions. What could possibly go wrong? But behind closed doors, insiders whispered of tension. Meghan was restless. Harry was conflicted. Staff noticed arguments that spilled into hallways, sharp words exchanged before a red carpet event, icy silences at the breakfast table. Yet the cameras never saw it. They only saw the smiles, the hand-holding, the crafted statements about compassion and togetherness. This is the illusion we're talking about. And illusions can be powerful. They fool not just the public, but sometimes the very people creating them. Was Harry fooling himself into believing everything was fine? Was Meghan convincing herself she could juggle her ambitions and her marriage without consequence? And then there's the branding. Remember their Netflix series? Remember the Archwell speeches? The polished photographs of family moments, the cute glimpses of Archie, the dramatic piano music underscoring Meghan's narration of pain and triumph? That wasn't just a documentary, it was a performance. Every angle, every pause, every tear felt deliberate. And audiences ate it up. Millions tuned in. It was the kind of spectacle that blurred the line between real life and scripted drama. But ask yourself, if everything was perfect, why did Meghan need to write the diary in the first place? Why did she need a secret place to pour out words she'd never dare to speak aloud? Let's rewind. Think back to the early days of their California escape. Harry seemed almost relieved at first, finally free of the stiff traditions of royal life. He'd walk barefoot on the beach, he'd talk about therapy, he'd speak candidly in podcasts. But as time passed, people close to him noticed something. Harry seemed lost. He wasn't the Prince of Britain anymore. He wasn't the military officer, the charity figure, or even the spare. In California, surrounded by billionaires and producers, Harry was just Meghan's husband. And Meghan thrived in that spotlight. She was the one in the interviews, the one commanding attention, the one securing deals. Harry was there, yes, but always in orbit, always secondary, always the echo. For a man who had spent his entire life in the shadow of his brother, that might not have seemed new. But for the man who gave up everything to be with Meghan, it stung. Here's the contradiction that should make you pause. Meghan often presented herself as the victim, the woman silenced by the monarchy, the outsider struggling against tradition. Yet in California, with Harry at her side, she became the dominant voice. Was this really about escaping control, or about gaining it? Let's ask the question bluntly. If Meghan was truly in love with Harry, why was so much of their brand about Meghan? Why did the spotlight seem to follow her, while Harry became more of a supporting act in his own life? This is where the illusion deepens. Because public perception and private reality are rarely the same. Meghan and Harry could film Netflix series after Netflix series, write books, deliver speeches, but no camera could capture the moment Harry sat alone, wondering if the love he thought he had was as real as it looked on screen. And remember, illusions require constant upkeep. The staff worked tirelessly to manage appearances. Gardeners kept the estate immaculate for drone shots. Stylists ensured Meghan's outfits screamed effortless glamour. Harry's words were polished for interviews to appear measured, compassionate, thoughtful. But how long can anyone maintain a perfect illusion before the cracks start to show? And those cracks did show. Little moments leaked to the press. A slammed door here. A canceled public outing there. Anonymous sources hinting at tension in paradise. Most dismissed it as gossip. After all, what celebrity couple doesn't fight now and then? But the truth, as we now know, was far darker. Because illusions don't just hide arguments. They hide intent. They hide motives. And in Meghan's case, the diary revealed what the illusion had always been protecting. The reality that she had never been in love with the man, only with the crown he carried on his shoulders. Think about it. Meghan's rise wasn't fueled by Meghan Markle the actress. It was fueled by Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex. Her name wasn't powerful because of Suits. It was powerful because of Harry. Every deal, every headline, every Netflix pitch leaned on one fact. She had married into the House of Windsor. Without Harry, would Meghan have become one of the most talked-about women in the world? Or would she still be fighting for guest roles in mid-tier dramas? And here lies the cruelest irony. Harry sacrificed his royal role to give Meghan freedom. He thought he was giving her love. In reality, he gave her the very status she admitted in her diary was all she ever wanted. This is why Chapter 1 matters so much. It sets the stage. It shows us the illusion of perfection that fooled not only the world, but Harry himself. He believed in the dream of Montecito. He believed in the fairy tale life. He believed in Meghan. But Meghan's own words, locked away in that diary, tell us she never believed in him. And that illusion, that fragile house of glass, was about to be shattered beyond repair. Because if Chapter 1 is about the illusion, Chapter 2 is about the discovery. And once Harry found that diary, there was no going back. The illusion was dead. And what came next would not just break their marriage, it would break everything they had built together. Every great illusion eventually cracks. And for Prince Harry, the crack came not through paparazzi photos, not through leaked emails, not even through a whispered tip-off from a palace insider. No, it came in the form of a leather-bound book, tucked away in the corner of Meghan's study, almost daring him to find it. Picture it, a quiet afternoon in Montecito, the California sun pouring through the massive windows of their multi-million-dollar mansion. The children with their nanny. Meghan out, perhaps at a meeting or on a call with Hollywood producers. Harry, restless, wandering the house like a man without purpose. He steps into her study, a room she had made entirely her own. Shelves stacked with self-help books, political memoirs, and carefully curated decor meant to scream sophistication. And there, on the desk, sat the diary. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't locked. It wasn't hidden in a safe. It was just there, bound in dark leather, edges slightly frayed, pages bulging with ink. To anyone else, it might have looked like just another notebook. But something about it caught Harry's eye. Maybe it was the way it sat open slightly, a page marked with a ribbon. Maybe it was instinct, that gut feeling Diana's son had learned to trust, the sense that behind every smile was a secret waiting to explode. And so he picked it up. Let me ask you, what would you do? If you found your partner's private diary, would you open it? Would you risk discovering truths you might never be able to unsee? Or would you put it down, respecting privacy but forever wondering? Harry didn't put it down. His hands trembled as he flipped the first page. At first, it seemed harmless. Notes about daily frustrations, complaints about the press, reflections on motherhood, ambition, stress. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But then, as he read on, the tone changed. The words grew colder, more strategic, less emotional, more calculating. And then, suddenly, there it was, the line that froze him in his tracks. I never loved him. I needed him to get the crown. Not the man, just the title. 16 words. 16 daggers straight into his heart. Can you imagine that moment? The weight of betrayal pressing down like a mountain. His chest tightening. His throat closing. The disbelief, the desperate hope that maybe he was misreading it, that maybe it was a draft for a novel, a fictional line, something, anything, other than a confession. But it was her handwriting, her voice on the page, her truth staring back at him. He read it again, and again, each time the words cut deeper. He dropped into the chair, staring at the ink as if it might rearrange itself into something less cruel. But it didn't. The more he turned the pages, the worse it became. Because this wasn't a one-off comment. The diary was filled with similar revelations. Entries about the strategy of marrying a prince. Notes on how global fame would skyrocket once she became a duchess. Frustrated musings that Harry was weaker than she expected, that his emotional scars made him difficult to manage. And the kicker, a line suggesting she always saw America as her endgame. The palace was never forever. Hollywood is forever. Think about that. While Harry was giving up everything, his military honors, his royal duties, his family, Meghan was already plotting her next chapter. He thought he was building a life of love and unity. She thought she was building a ladder to climb. And the cruelest part? Harry wasn't just reading her rejection of him as a husband. He was reading her rejection of him as a man. Meghan wrote of longing for influence, for status, for the adoration of millions. But rarely did she write of longing for Harry himself. Not his smile, not his heart, not the boy broken by Diana's death who only wanted to be loved for who he was. That realization shattered him. Now, pause for a moment and think about the irony here. Meghan and Harry had presented themselves as warriors against intrusion, victims of a press that had no right to invade their privacy. Yet here was Meghan, pinning down the kind of truths that no paparazzo could invent, truths far darker than any headline. And Harry, the man who loathed tabloid stories, had now stumbled upon the one story no one had yet told. The story Meghan was telling herself. His mind raced. Was this why she had always pushed so hard for the spotlight? Was this why she never seemed content, even after leaving the monarchy? Was this why every interview, every podcast, every speech seemed more about Meghan's journey than their shared struggle? Suddenly, it all made sense. And then came the fury. He gave me everything I wanted, but I never wanted him. It was there, in black and white. The cruelest confession. The kind of line that haunts a man forever. Harry slammed the book shut, his chest heaving. But curiosity and pain drove him to open it again, as if torturing himself further. He read the sentence once more, almost begging it to change. It didn't. It never would. This is where we see the raw humanity of Harry. A prince by birth, a soldier by training, a husband by choice. But at that moment, just a man crushed under the weight of betrayal. The cameras weren't rolling. Meghan wasn't nearby to defend herself. There were no staff to interrupt. It was just him, the diary, and the devastating truth. And yet, even in the wreckage, part of him wondered, was there any chance he was misunderstanding? Could these words have been venting? A moment of frustration? But no, the entries were too consistent, too calculated, too cold. This wasn't a passing mood. This was a pattern. Here's where irony bites hardest. Meghan had always accused the monarchy of scripting her, of silencing her, of using her as a pawn in their image. But her own diary revealed the reverse, that she had scripted Harry, silenced his doubts, used him as the pawn in her performance. Now, let's pause and ask the audience. If you were in Harry's shoes, what would you do? Would you confront Meghan immediately? Would you burn the diary and pretend you never saw it? Or would you walk away, knowing the foundation of your marriage had been built on sand? Harry wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. But his heart was hardening with every page. Because beyond the admissions of manipulation, there were hints of her future plans. Mentions of keeping options open in Hollywood. Notes about meetings with producers, ideas for brand expansion. Even an outline of a potential memoir, her version of events. One that would paint Harry as troubled, unstable, in need of her guidance. Can you imagine reading that about yourself? The realization that not only had she never loved you, but she had already considered how to rewrite the story of your marriage to benefit her? That wasn't love. That was strategy. And yet, here's the most chilling twist. Meghan's words weren't filled with guilt. They weren't regretful. They were triumphant. She wrote of her ability to shift narratives, of her talent in controlling public perception, of her satisfaction in outmaneuvering both the monarchy and the press. She saw herself as a master strategist, not a flawed partner. Harry's hands trembled as he shoved the diary back onto the desk. He felt sick, betrayed, enraged, and utterly humiliated. How could he, of all people, the man raised in a palace surrounded by schemers and sycophants, have fallen for this? How could he not have seen it? He stormed out of the study, pacing the halls, his mind spiraling. The walls of Montecito suddenly felt like a prison. Every corner, every photograph of smiling family moments now seemed tainted. He thought of Archie and Lilibet, innocent, unknowing, yet already part of a narrative they hadn't chosen. What would this mean for them? For their future? And most of all, what would it mean for him? The confession in Meghan's diary had destroyed the illusion. But Harry knew this was only the beginning. The words he had just read weren't just betrayal. They were a declaration that Meghan had never loved him, never wanted him, and never planned to stop using him. The fury building inside him could no longer be contained. The diary wasn't going back on the desk. The confrontation was coming. And when it did, the walls of Montecito would shake with the force of a royal explosion. Because Harry wasn't just heartbroken. He was ready for war. And what happened next would be louder, crueler, and more public than anything Meghan had ever feared. But the moment he opened his mouth to confront her, the storm truly began, and it would leave their marriage in ruins. Every man has a breaking point. For Prince Harry, that point came the moment the diary slammed shut. The words he had read were still echoing in his mind. Not love, only strategy. Not devotion, only ambition. Not him, only the title. He had spent his entire life keeping his anger in check. Through his teenage years, through military service, through royal duty, through the endless tabloid headlines. He had learned to grit his teeth, to walk behind his brother, to keep calm under scrutiny. But this time, there were no cameras, no palace handlers, no royal advisors smoothing things over. This was raw, unfiltered rage. When Meghan walked through the door that evening, she was met with a man she had never seen before. His face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking not with fear, but with fury. The diary lay on the desk in front of him, open to one of the damning pages. Care to explain this? Harry's voice was low, tight, almost trembling. Meghan froze. For a moment, she looked confused, or perhaps she was pretending to be. Her eyes darted to the diary, then back to him. A flicker of panic, quickly masked by indignation. That's private, she snapped, her tone sharp, defensive. You had no right to read that. But Harry wasn't having it. Not this time. No right, he exploded, slamming his fist onto the desk so hard the lamp rattled. No right. I've given you everything. I walked away from my family, my country, my duty, for you. And all along, you're writing that you never loved me. Meghan tried to regain control, her voice rising to meet his. You're twisting my words. You don't understand context. Context, Harry roared, stepping closer, his voice echoing through the house. What context makes it acceptable to write that you used me? That I was nothing more than a title to you? The walls of the Montecito mansion had heard many arguments before, but nothing like this. This was volcanic. Years of buried frustration poured out of Harry in a torrent. You lied to me, he shouted. From the very beginning. You made me believe this was about us, about love, about building something real. And all along, it was just a performance, wasn't it? Just another script. Meghan's eyes narrowed. She hated losing control. You don't get it, Harry, she shot back, her voice dripping with coldness. I had to survive. I had to strategize. Do you think I could have made it otherwise? Do you think anyone was going to hand me power? No. I had to take it. And you were the key. Her words hit him like a slap. She wasn't even denying it. She was justifying it. So, I was just a means to an end? His voice cracked now, the rage colliding with heartbreak. That's all I ever was to you. Meghan's silence was louder than any confession. And here's where the human tragedy becomes unbearable. Harry wasn't just a husband betrayed. He was a boy reliving the pain of losing his mother, the trauma of being abandoned, the scars of being overshadowed. Meghan's words reopened every wound Diana's death had left behind. Once again, he had loved someone with his whole heart, and once again, they were gone. The shouting grew louder. Staff whispered outside the door, unsure whether to intervene. Archie and Lilibet, thankfully, were elsewhere with the nanny, spared from the eruption. But the sound of voices, the slamming of doors, the rage reverberating down the hall. This was the night the Sussex marriage cracked wide open. Do you know what it feels like? Harry shouted, his voice hoarse. To give up my identity, my family, my honor, for someone who never even wanted me? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? Meghan folded her arms, her tone icy. I gave you freedom, Harry. Without me, you'd still be a puppet of that family. I saved you from them, and you're too blind to see it. Freedom. That word cut deeper than she intended. Harry laughed bitterly, a sound more painful than any shout. Freedom? You call this freedom? Living in a mansion I barely recognize, cut off from my brother, estranged from my father, mocked by the press, while you plot your Hollywood empire. That's not freedom. That's a prison, and you built it. For a moment, silence. Meghan's mask slipped. She looked shaken. But then, just as quickly, her composure returned. She stepped closer, her eyes burning with defiance. You think you're the victim here? She hissed. Grow up, Harry. This was never going to be about you. It was about us. About what we could achieve together. And if you can't handle that, maybe you're not the man I thought you were. Those words, maybe you're not the man I thought you were the final spark. Harry's rage boiled over. No, he growled, his voice trembling with finality. Maybe you're not the woman I thought you were. And with that, the line was crossed. The fury had erupted, the love had curdled, and the marriage was teetering on the edge of collapse. Neighbors would later whisper about hearing raised voices that night. Some claimed they saw Meghan storming into the garden, phone pressed to her ear. Others said Harry was spotted pacing the driveway, fists clenched, tears streaming down his face. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. The illusion of Montecito was gone. And as the night dragged on, the shouting turned into silence. The silence of realization. The silence of a couple who knew they couldn't go back. But silence doesn't mean peace. Because what came after Harry's fury was even more shocking. The decision he made in the heat of betrayal, the decision to force Meghan out of the house, would change everything. And Meghan, humiliated and enraged, would not go quietly. Because this wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. Every storm has its aftermath. And in Montecito, the storm inside the Sussex home left only one possible outcome. Meghan had to go. Harry was no longer the man who once begged Meghan to stay by his side against the crown, no longer the husband who shielded her from relentless criticism, no longer the partner who walked behind her while she claimed the spotlight. That Harry was gone. In his place stood a man betrayed, enraged, and unwilling to allow the illusion to continue for even one more day. The decision came swiftly, almost brutally. "You can't stay here," Harry said, his voice low, broken but firm. "Not after this. Not after everything I've read." Meghan's jaw tightened. She had expected rage. She had expected shouting, accusations, maybe even tears. But she hadn't expected this. To be cast out of her own empire, the very mansion that had become their stage, their sanctuary, their fortress. "This is our home," she snapped, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You don't get to decide that." But Harry wasn't backing down. He pointed to the diary still lying on the desk. "That says otherwise. You never loved me. You used me. You made this house your stage, this marriage your ladder. And now, you've fallen off it." The silence that followed was deafening. Meghan's chest rose and fell rapidly. For once, her words failed her. She was cornered, not by the press, not by palace aides, not by royal tradition, but by her own handwriting. Harry pressed on. "Pack your things. Leave. Take your calls, your PR teams, your schemes, but not my children. Archie and Lilibet stay here." And there it was. The ultimatum. The line in the sand. Meghan's eyes widened in fury. "You think you can keep them from me?" she spat. "I'm their mother. They need me." Harry's expression hardened. What they need is truth. Stability. Not lies. Not manipulation. They need a parent who loves them for who they are, not for the brand they represent. And right now, that isn't you. Meghan's hand flew to her mouth as if he had struck her. The humiliation, the insult, the public image flashing through her mind. How would it look if she was the one cast out? If the narrative shifted and she became the outsider, the disgraced Duchess turned exile? Because make no mistake, Meghan Markle's greatest fear wasn't losing Harry's affection. It was losing control of the story. The confrontation escalated. Meghan raised her voice, insisting Harry was overreacting, that the diary entries were being twisted and taken out of context. She pleaded, then demanded, then threatened. But Harry's resolve was like stone. For once, he was immovable. Staff lingered nervously in the corridors, catching fragments of the argument. "Get out. You'll regret this. The world will know the truth. The truth is already written, Meghan." And then came the moment of finality. Harry walked to the front door, flung it open, and turned back toward her. His voice was steady, cold, final. "Leave. Now." Meghan stood frozen, her pride battling her fear. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not palace courtiers, not Hollywood producers, not even her most bitter critics. But Harry, the man she once thought she controlled, had flipped the script. He wasn't the obedient partner anymore. He wasn't the man who nodded silently beside her. He was the man who had discovered her secret, and he was done. Finally, Meghan's fury cracked into desperation. "Harry, think about what you're doing. The press will eat this alive. You'll look unstable. You'll look like the villain. Do you really want to hand them that?" But Harry didn't flinch. Better a villain than a fool. The words landed like a hammer. Meghan's face drained of color. There was no winning this argument. Not here. Not now. Slowly, with trembling hands, she began gathering her things. A bag. A phone. Papers. She moved like someone in shock, disbelief etched into every step. The staff pretended not to watch, but their eyes followed her every movement. The woman who had once commanded the Montecito mansion like a queen was reduced to a figure of humiliation, packing in silence while her husband stood firm. Outside, the California sun was setting. The golden light bathed the mansion in warmth, but inside, the atmosphere was ice. Meghan paused at the door, turning back one last time. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. Harry met her gaze, his eyes bloodshot but unyielding. "The only thing I regret," he said, "is believing you ever loved me." And with that, Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, Hollywood's self-styled royal rebel, walked out of the Montecito estate. Not as a queen, not as a victim, but as an exile. The staff exchanged glances. Some were stunned. Others, perhaps, were not surprised at all. After all, hadn't the whispers always suggested this day would come? That the fairy tale would end not with applause, but with silence and slammed doors. And then there was Harry, standing alone in the doorway, watching the mother of his children leave, his heart a battlefield of fury and grief. He had won the confrontation, but the cost was immeasurable. His marriage was in ruins, his children's future uncertain, his own soul torn apart. Yet beneath the devastation, something else stirred in him. Resolve, a fire, a determination not to let the diary's revelations define him forever. For the first time in years, Harry felt control, and he wasn't going to give it up again. But Meghan? She wasn't finished. She never was. Her humiliation would soon morph into a counterattack that Harry could barely imagine. Because Meghan Markle does not lose quietly. She does not leave the stage without planning an encore. And as the door closed behind her, Harry knew one thing for certain. The war had only just begun. Children never ask to be born into chaos. They don't choose their parents, their surnames, or, in this case, their titles. Archie and Lilibet were born into a world of crowns, cameras, and controversy, but they had no voice in the battles waged around them. And now, as Meghan walked out of the Montecito estate in humiliation, the weight of this fractured marriage fell hardest on their tiny shoulders. The silence in the house after Meghan left was deafening. Archie's toys scattered across the living room floor. Lilibet's crib upstairs, still warm from her afternoon nap. Harry stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door, his chest heaving with the residue of rage. He had forced Meghan out, but he knew the true fight had only begun, the fight for his children. Because Meghan wasn't going to vanish. No. She would use every tool at her disposal, her voice, her PR machine, her legal team, to frame herself as the devoted mother torn away from her babies. She would wield Archie and Lilibet as weapons in a war Harry never wanted. But in that moment, Harry was resolute. "They stay with me," he whispered to himself, almost like a vow. "I'll protect them." Let's pause here. Imagine what it must feel like. The crushing realization that the two people you love most, your own children, could become pawns in a battle between loyalty and ambition. Harry knew the press would salivate over this. Custody disputes, public statements, emotional headlines. And through it all, Archie and Lilibet's faces would be plastered across the world, their innocence consumed by a machine that had already devoured so much of Harry's life. But here's the contradiction. Meghan wasn't wrong when she said children need their mother. And Harry wasn't wrong when he said they needed stability. Both were right. Both were wrong. And the children were caught in the middle. That night, Harry tucked Archie into bed himself. The little boy, barely old enough to understand, asked softly, "Where's Mummy?" The question shattered him. Harry knelt beside the bed, fighting tears, trying to find words that wouldn't scar his son. "Mummy's gone for now," he whispered, brushing back Archie's hair. "But Daddy's here. Always." And upstairs, he held Lilibet in his arms, rocking her to sleep, whispering the same words Diana once whispered to him. "You're safe. I'll protect you." But could he really protect them? That was the haunting question. Because Meghan wasn't about to fade into the background. No. Even as Harry tucked the children in, Meghan was already plotting her next move. Already calling allies. Already speaking to advisors. Already crafting the narrative. Meghan, the devoted mother, cast out by a vindictive husband. She would paint Harry as unstable, irrational, dangerous even. And in custody battles, perception is everything. The fallout with the children wasn't just about bedtime stories and absent parents. It was about ownership. Who gets to define Archie and Lilibet's future? Who gets to raise them, guide them, shape them? Harry believed he was fighting for their souls. Meghan believed she was fighting for her rights. And neither was willing to back down. Insiders later whispered that this was the moment Harry hardened into steel. "I won't let history repeat itself," he told a confidant. He remembered his own childhood, the bitter divorce of Charles and Diana, the endless custody disputes, the tabloid feeding frenzy. He remembered being paraded before cameras while his parents' marriage collapsed. He swore his children wouldn't suffer the same fate. But how do you shield children when the battlefield is your own home? When every bedtime story, every family photo, every Christmas holiday is a reminder of what's been lost? Here's the irony. For years, Harry and Meghan claimed they fled the monarchy to protect their children from the spotlight. Yet now, in Montecito, with the diary exposed and Meghan exiled, Archie and Lilibet were at greater risk than ever before. Not from paparazzi, but from the war between their own parents. Let's ask the audience here, what matters more in a family, love or truth? Should Harry have shielded his children from the truth of Meghan's betrayal by pretending the marriage was intact? Or was it better to shatter the illusion now, to give them a father who stood for honesty, even if it meant breaking their home apart? These are questions that torment every parent in a broken marriage. But for Harry, the stakes were magnified 1,000-fold. In the weeks that followed Meghan's departure, Harry tried to create a sense of normalcy. Breakfast with Archie in the garden, walks with Lilibet in the stroller, bedtime routines filled with laughter. But beneath the surface, the tension was unbearable. Every giggle from Archie reminded him of what was missing. Every smile from Lilibet made him ache for the family unit he thought he had built. And then came Meghan's first strike. A carefully worded statement released through unnamed friends, painting her as the heartbroken mother denied access to her children. Headlines screamed, "Meghan cast out." Harry blocks Meghan from Archie and Lilibet. Sympathy poured in from her supporters. Social media erupted with hashtags. Hashtag let Meghan see her kids. Hashtag justice for Meghan. Harry felt the tide turning. His fury had given him strength, but Meghan's PR war threatened to paint him as the villain, the unstable prince, lashing out in paranoia, cruelly keeping children from their mother. Exactly the kind of narrative Meghan knew would sting. And here's the cruel twist. Archie and Lilibet would grow up and one day read these headlines. They would one day ask questions. They would one day confront both parents about what really happened. Harry knew this, and that's why he clung to the truth of the diary. To him, it was proof. Proof that he wasn't the villain. Proof that Meghan had betrayed him. Proof that his actions were justified. But how do you explain that to children? How do you one day sit down with your daughter and say, "Your mother never loved me. She only wanted what I represented"? How do you look into your son's eyes and say, "I forced her out to protect you"? The fallout with the children wasn't just about custody. It was about legacy, about which parent would one day have their version of the story believed. And for Harry, that realization was terrifying, because Meghan wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the hearts and minds of Archie and Lilibet. And Harry knew that if she won that battle, he would lose everything. Not just his marriage, not just his reputation, but his children's love. The Montecito mansion, once their fortress, had become a battlefield. And the children, too young to understand, were already casualties of a war they never asked for. But this was only the beginning. Because while Harry clung to his role as protector, Meghan was preparing her counterattack. And what she did next would ignite a firestorm that reached all the way back to Buckingham Palace. And the Crown, watching from across the ocean, was ready to seize its opportunity. News travels fast in royal circles. Faster than the tabloids, faster than social media, faster than the world could possibly imagine. Within days of Meghan's abrupt departure from Montecito, whispers had already crossed the ocean. Courtiers in Buckingham Palace knew. Advisors in Clarence House knew. William and Camilla, and finally King Charles himself, all knew. And their reaction? A mixture of vindication, caution, and cold calculation. For years, Meghan had been the thorn in the monarchy's side, the rebel duchess who accused them of cruelty, racism, and emotional neglect. She and Harry had painted the Crown as an outdated, toxic institution. Their Oprah interview had been a bombshell, their Netflix series a dagger, Harry's memoir Spare a public lashing. The monarchy had endured humiliation after humiliation. But now the tables had turned. Inside the palace walls, the whispers weren't sympathetic. They were sharp. "We told him." He wouldn't listen. "He's finally seen the truth." Princess, and, ever blunt, was rumored to have said to a confidant. It was never about him. It was always about her. Anyone with eyes could see it. William, though more restrained, reportedly felt a bitter satisfaction. After years of estrangement, after being cast as the villainous brother in Harry's narrative, William saw his younger brother finally confronted with the reality he had tried to warn him about. "She'll eat him alive," William had once told friends. Now it seemed she had. But King Charles? His reaction was the most strategic of all. Charles, now deep into his reign, had always feared Harry and Meghan's media machine. Their ability to command sympathy, to sway public opinion, to outshine the monarchy's own messaging. But with Meghan exiled and Harry left broken, Charles saw not just a family scandal, but an opportunity. Advisors gathered in private meetings, poring over reports, social sentiment, and international headlines. Meghan's allies were framing her as a victim, yes, but cracks were forming. The diary's existence, though not yet leaked publicly, was being whispered about in media circles. The palace knew it was only a matter of time before excerpts surfaced. And when they did, Meghan's carefully crafted image could collapse. "This is our moment," one aide reportedly told Charles. "If we play this right, we don't just neutralize Meghan. We bring Harry back into the fold." Imagine the irony. The very son who had walked away from the monarchy, who had declared independence, who had painted them as villains, now weakened, humiliated, and vulnerable. To the palace, it was the ultimate twist of fate. But was Harry ready to return? That was the question. Behind closed doors, William remained skeptical. Trust had been shattered too many times. He had been called cold, cruel, complicit in Meghan's suffering. Harry's memoir had branded him as the jealous brother, the aggressor. To William, reconciliation seemed unthinkable. Yet Charles, ever the strategist, saw the long game. "He is my son," he told aides, "and he will always be part of this family. In time, the door must remain open." And let's not underestimate Camilla's role. For decades, she had been the target of Diana's supporters, painted as the other woman, the villainess. Now, watching Meghan's public image teeter, Camilla is said to have smirked privately. "The crown always outlasts the actors," she reportedly told a confidant. The British press, ever hungry, smelled blood. Tabloids that once championed Meghan's victim narrative began shifting tone. Headlines grew sharper, less sympathetic. The diary divide. One paper teased, "Harry betrayed, or just paranoid?" Another front page boldly asked, "Was Meghan's love ever real?" The palace didn't need to plant these stories. The media had picked up the scent on its own. All the monarchy had to do was sit back and let Meghan's empire crumble. But not everyone in London was rejoicing. Some insiders worried about the children. "Archie and Lilibet are half royal," one source whispered. "They're still the king's grandchildren. This war will shape their lives forever." Indeed, even as Charles considered his legacy, he knew the long-term impact. If Meghan poisoned the children against the monarchy, the royal family could lose its connection to them entirely. And for a king desperate to project unity and stability, that was unacceptable. Meanwhile, William was playing his own chess game. Publicly, he remained silent, as he always did. Privately, he hardened his resolve. "No half measures," he reportedly told aides. "Either Harry stands with us, or he doesn't. There is no middle ground anymore." The palace machine began preparing quietly. Legal teams on standby. Crisis communications drafted. Talking points ready for senior royals in case the diary exploded into the public domain. They wouldn't attack Meghan directly. No, the monarchy never gets its hands dirty. Instead, they would let sources and friends of the palace shape the narrative. They would let Meghan's own words damn her. And Harry? Word reached London that he was shattered but furious, protective of Archie and Lilibet, and unwilling to forgive. For the first time in years, palace insiders felt the tide turning in their favor. Here's the irony. For years, Harry had accused the monarchy of betrayal. But now, in his private exile in Montecito, betrayed by Meghan's diary, Harry himself became the betrayed. And the crown, ever patient, ever calculating, saw the poetry in it. Now let's ask the question, did the palace want Meghan gone all along? Was this the endgame they had silently hoped for, watching from across the ocean as the Sussex marriage frayed? Or were they genuinely blindsided by the speed of its collapse? We may never know. But one thing is certain. Buckingham Palace was ready. Ready to reclaim the narrative. Ready to outlast Meghan. Ready, perhaps, to welcome Harry home, on their terms. And Meghan? She knew it. She could feel the crown breathing down her neck. And that's why her next move wasn't desperation, it was defiance. Because Meghan Markle doesn't retreat. She retaliates. And her counterattack was about to begin. Meghan Markle does not lose quietly. For all her poise, for all her carefully crafted speeches about compassion and resilience, Meghan's greatest skill has always been survival. She didn't claw her way from a mid-tier TV actress to one of the most recognizable women on the planet by accepting defeat. No, when Meghan is cornered, she doesn't retreat. She recalibrates. She rebrands. She retaliates. And that's exactly what she did after Harry forced her out of Montecito. Within hours of slamming the door behind her, Meghan was on the phone. Not to family, not to friends in Montecito, but to her network, the PR consultants, the Hollywood executives, the sympathetic journalists who had always been eager to give her side of the story. If Harry thought her exile was the end, he was wrong. For Meghan, it was only the beginning of a new campaign. Let's be clear, Meghan's weapon has never been silence. Her weapon has always been narrative. From her first date with Harry to the Oprah interview to the Netflix docuseries, Meghan has mastered the art of shaping public opinion. She knows how to cry at the right moment, how to invoke Diana's ghost, how to frame herself as the outsider fighting against cruel institutions. She had done it with the monarchy, and now she would do it again, this time against Harry himself. Her opening move? The leak. Within days, a series of anonymous sources close to Meghan began speaking to tabloids and entertainment outlets. The message was consistent. Meghan was devastated. Meghan was blindsided. Meghan, the loving mother, had been cruelly separated from Archie and Lilibet by a paranoid, unstable Harry. The diary? Never mentioned. Instead, the narrative was spun into a story of a heartbroken woman cast out of her own home. And the media ate it up. Headlines screamed. Harry's rage, Meghan forced out. Heartbroken Duchess in tears after Montecito meltdown. Meghan kept from her children. Friends say she's destroyed. The hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag justice for Meghan. Hashtag let Meghan see her kids. Twitter exploded with debates. TikTok flooded with teary-eyed creators analyzing every angle. Suddenly, Harry's fury was being painted as cruelty. Meghan, the victim once again. But that was just the first wave. Meghan wasn't done. She began assembling her Hollywood allies. The same producers who had courted her, the same actors and activists who had once rallied to her defense. Behind closed doors, meetings were held. Strategies were drawn. Meghan knew she had to strike before the diary leaked. She had to control the story before the story controlled her. And so, whispers began circulating that Harry had become erratic, unstable, unable to control his temper. Meghan's allies hinted at concerns for her safety, framing her departure not as betrayal exposed, but as escape from an unsafe environment. It was a subtle but powerful shift. The woman forced out was now the woman who bravely walked away. Pause here and consider the brilliance of it. Meghan didn't need to deny the diary. She just needed to change the subject. In media warfare, distraction is more powerful than defense. By painting Harry as angry, dangerous, and irrational, she shifted the spotlight away from her words and onto his behavior. And once again, she played the role of victim-turned-survivor. But there was another card up her sleeve, one she had played before. Hollywood. Talks began of Meghan returning to acting. Rumors swirled about memoirs, documentaries, even a tell-all series about her escape from Montecito. She knew the public loved drama, and nothing sold like betrayal. If Harry thought the diary would end her, Meghan was ready to weaponize it instead. Insiders claimed she even considered a sit-down interview, Oprah 2.0, an exclusive where she could cry on cue, smile bravely, and insist she had only ever loved Harry, only ever wanted what was best. She could frame the diary as fiction, a private therapeutic exercise, misunderstood by a husband too wounded to see clearly. And millions would believe her. Because here's the truth. Meghan has always been a performer. Not just on screen, but in life. She knows how to deliver a line, how to tilt her head just so, how to make pain look poetic. And in a battle of narratives, performance is everything. Meanwhile, Harry's camp was quiet. Too quiet. He wasn't prepared for Meghan's counterattack. He was still reeling, still angry, still clutching the diary like a lifeline. But Meghan's silence had ended, and with every headline, she was reclaiming control. And then came the children. Meghan's team began floating emotional anecdotes. Stories of Archie asking for his mother, of Lilibet crying at night. True or not, they tugged at heartstrings. The world didn't see Meghan as a manipulator. They saw her as a mother being denied her children. And Harry, by extension, became the villain. Imagine his fury, watching the narrative twist like this. He had the truth in ink, but Meghan had the truth in sound bites. And in the modern age, which matters more? A diary no one had read, or a story millions were hearing? This is where the irony cuts deepest. For years, Harry had despised the media, blaming it for Diana's death, for his own misery, for the collapse of his royal life. Meghan had convinced him to weaponize it against the crown. And now, Meghan was weaponizing it against him. The very machine he hated was now her greatest ally and his greatest enemy. But Meghan wasn't just playing defense. She was preparing offense. Behind the scenes, lawyers were consulted. Custody papers drafted. Strategies discussed. If Harry thought she would surrender Archie and Lilibet, he was mistaken. Meghan was ready to drag the battle into court, ready to paint herself as the mother wronged by a vindictive ex-prince. And here's where the cliffhanger looms. Because just as Meghan prepared her counterattack, Harry was preparing one of his own. He had something Meghan didn't: her words. Her diary. The unfiltered, undeniable confessions she couldn't spin. The question wasn't whether he'd use it. The question was when. Meghan had fired the first shots in the PR war. But Harry held the nuclear weapon. And once he unleashed it, there would be no turning back.